stay there for another 10 minutes. Yeah.
Is that my training for what your government's going to do to me the rest of my life?
My name is Phil Maloney Jr. and I volunteer as the Pennsylvania Campus Coordinator for the Ron Paul 2012 Presidential Campaign. A huge thanks is in order for all of the Pennsylvania Youth Reform members and all the supporters across the Commonwealth. As many of you may know, Dr. Paul was born in this very city in the heart of the Great Depression. Recession. What better man, what more knowledgeable man, what more principled man is there to lead us as a country of individuals out of our economic turmoil? At the very beginning of this race, he was the only candidate who came to the table with a solid plan to directly confront our nation's biggest economic dilemma, the debt. He remains the only one with a bold plan based on the common sense principle: cut the spending. His plan would cut $1 trillion in the first year and balance the budget by year 3. Real solutions that you will not hear from any of the other candidates. With the most consistent voting record in Congress today, the lone voice when it comes to addressing our outdated monetary policy and the issues of our non-transparent Federal Reserve system. He has encouraged and inspired a great number of people to rally behind him and continue his efforts. We are those people, and our numbers are growing. Yeah! As we come to understand more and more the importance of civil liberties, sound money, and the economic power of peace and freedom, we have an obligation to our nation's citizens to inform and inspire them the way Dr. Paul has so generously informed and inspired each and every one of us. As he likes to say, freedom is popular. It is popular, Dr. Paul, and we have you to thank for that. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming back to the place of his birth, so glad to see you. Thank you. Quick regret, the cause of liberty will be remembered for a long time, and the ball game will be forgotten. It's very nice, and of course you know that reception has been excellent and across the country, on the colleges in particular. But every once in a while we come up short on the coverage. You know, evening news doesn't seem. And when they do, they come up with headlines. Where's Ron Paul? What is it? Where's the media? They claim they don't hear from us, but I think there'll be a recording or two, and maybe they will hear from us. Eventually, they must hear from us because we cannot continue what we have today. I think this is why the country is so different from 4 years ago. We were in a campaign 4 years ago, and I considered it very successful. But there's a dramatic difference between now, today, and 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there were not that many people who had an interest in the Federal Reserve. Today, it's a really big issue. For the first time in the history of the Federal Reserve, monetary policy in the Federal Reserve is one of the big issues of the campaign.
Yes.
That sounds like a very good idea. Suppose next year, after the election, we pass a bill that repeals the Federal Reserve. That isn't done immediately. What has to be done immediately, and the country now is very much with us. Let's get a full audit of the Federal Reserve and find out what they've been doing. The Federal Reserve has been operating in secret for a long time. Of course, I can understand why they would want to when you find out what they're up to. But they would like to continue to operate in secret because I think they do know deep down in their hearts, the people that are in charge, it's a totally unconstitutional organization. There's no authority in the Constitution for a central bank. And Congress has a responsibility of oversight of those creatures that they bring about. So oversight is the natural thing that we should have. What we need is a lot more transparency of the government and a lot less of the invasion of our privacy. Federal Reserve for 100 years has had a mandate for full employment and stable prices. Well, they haven't been doing so well. And as years go on, it gets worse. They're down to a 2-cent dollar compared to the dollar of 1913 that they were entrusted to. So the unemployment rate, when you look at it honestly, is closer to 20% than the 7 or 8 or 9% that they claim. There's no such thing that we've experienced for a long, long time with stable prices. So I would give the Federal Reserve a very, very low grade. I would think, I don't know whether it's an F or an F minus. One thing that we have to understand about monetary policy is if we oppose big government, which I'm assuming that just about everybody in this audience is having big government and having government do the things it's been doing for so long is always at the expense of liberty. So if you advocate big government, you always have to sacrifice some portion of our personal liberty. So this is the reason that once you come around to endorsing the basic principle of liberty, you have to be in opposition, to the big government and the financing of big government through the Federal Reserve System. What would happen if you didn't have a Federal Reserve to facilitate big government? is the government would have to pay their bills. If they didn't have enough taxation, they would have to borrow the money. But if you didn't have the Fed to buy the debt, then it would stop, because if they were spending too much, interest rates would go up and they would recognize that we can't afford it. The fact that you can borrow, and we have been sort of given the blessing of a reserve currency, it has allowed this borrowing to go on too long and the inflation to go on too long. But what has happened in these last 4 years is that the attitude has changed. The people are waking up in two areas. The economic crisis has hit. People know that we're not going to come flying out of this, that we have to have structural changes, and they're also fed up with our foreign policy, and they want our troops to come home. If you don't support the war by voting for the spending, they want to paint you as being un-American, unpatriotic, and not caring about the troops. If they ever say that to you, ask them why the active military personnel donates more money to our campaign than all the other campaigns. They know what it's like. It's one of the, psychologically, it's one of the most overbearing wars that we've ever been in. Even in World War II, the length of time that our soldiers were exposed to potential immediate danger was very short compared to what's going on now, and you add this up. And it is understandable why so many are coming home. Not only do they have head injuries, but they have this post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's real, and they're suffering for it. We now have an epidemic of suicide. We're losing more of our military personnel from suicide, from the fighting over there. But it's deeply flawed in foreign policy, getting individuals involved in wars that have not been declared, they're not moral, they're not constitutional, and it doesn't make sense. We don't know why we're there, we don't know why it's in. Why does somebody want to go over there and get shot at and get killed and see no end to it? It's very frustrating, and that is the reason if we care about our active duty people, if we care about our national defense, if we care about our veterans, we change our foreign policy to defend this country and not be the policeman on the way. Yeah! This means that $4 trillion would have been spent here at home. It would have been our money. We wouldn't have had borrowed, we wouldn't have had the printing, we wouldn't have had the inflation, we wouldn't have as much complication with the business cycle. But it is driving us into deep debt. And all great nations who overextend themselves overseas and develop empires, they always come down because they become arrogant and they stretch themselves too thinly around the world. And today, unfortunately, our declaration of war is this declaration of war, the global war on terror. It has been announced that is every place, any time, in any country that we have assumed that we have the moral authority to drop missiles and bombs and drones in any country. And believe me, they don't like it. And yet people resent it. They would like it much better if we promoted our goodness by setting a good example here at home. One thing about the military, we don't have to worry about any other country ever invading us and attacking us. We are by far the strongest ever in the history of the world. We have more weapons than everybody else put together, and we have an efficient army if they have to fight. But our problem isn't a foreign invasion. Our problem is the other half of our oath of office. we swear to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. After the disastrous war in Vietnam, during the period of time I was in the military, I was drafted in 1962 during the Cuban crisis and was in for 5 years. But after the war finally ended in Vietnam, and obviously without victory for us, after losing 60,000 Americans, over 1 million Vietnamese died, and how many wounded we have, and all the money we spent, which actually been a whole decade of economic crisis in the 70s. But shortly after the war ended, a colonel for us, an American colonel named Harry Summers, met with Colonel Tu, who was Vietnamese. And they got together and they were talking and they were cleaning up the mess, and these are the rules, and we were leaving, this sort of thing. And our colonel said to the Vietnamese colonel, and said, you know, you never defeated us once on the battlefield. We always won militarily. And you know, Tu said to him, he says, you are right, but it's irrelevant. Because he did not understand, we didn't understand then, and we don't understand now. We can have a military power, and we can bomb and kill and occupy and pretend we're democratizing these countries. But what is much more important is winning the hearts and the minds of the people. And you can't do that. You can't destroy the ability of people to want to take care of their homeland. The whole idea of the Taliban is not to be anti-American. They're anti-occupiers. We worked with the Taliban when the Soviets were occupying Afghanistan, and we're on the receiving end of it. Is to seek power and control and serve the special interests. It's not so much as a difference between their two philosophies. They have their special interests. The Federal Reserve protects both sides, and yet there is a struggle for power. That is real. That is a real program going on, and that is what they pretend they're different. But today it's different. It's only about power because there's no wealth there. This is the reason why there's no budget resolutions even come to the floor anymore. Because there's no money left, and they don't know what to do, and they won't admit it. But I'll tell you what, they're struggling with power, and that's what politics has been about for so long. But guess what? Being involved in the campaign for liberty, in which we are doing, we are winning the hearts and minds of the American people. But it's on trial right now because we are no longer the richest nation. We have now claimed that we are the most indebted nation in the history of the world. And we aren't producing. Our real productive jobs have gone overseas. So this will not continue. This is the reason that in the near future, exactly the dates I don't know, but in the next several years, what this generation will have to do, those who are getting out of school now, and I think they must understand this because the greatest support we are getting for the cause of liberty are from the people who are from the age of 18 to 30, and I am excited about that because that really should give us all a lot of encouragement. that if the election was limited to the 18-year-olds at 30, I might well win this election hands down. We are definitely winning this. The groundwork has been laid. The movement is on. It's not going to stop. I love to use the quote, you know, an idea whose time has come. Armies and governments cannot stop us. Even at the time of our original revolution, it was only a small number of people who really carried the day. It was a small, irate, tireless minority that motivated others to join. Most people, the large number of people in the country never will come to a speech like this. But the masses of people will be motivated by others. And it is so important that we continue this because the irate, tireless minority is with us today and it's growing by leaps and bounds, and that should encourage all of us.
Yes.
As Samuel Adams described it, he says that tireless minority should be and will, for success, start wildfire, brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. And believe me, there are a lot of brush fires going on. It's going on a daily basis. People are waking up. I see positive signs when you see statistics that show that 75% of the American people now that know there's something wrong with the Federal Reserve and we ought to do something about it. Shows that over 70% of the American people agree with us now. It's time to come home. Time to come home. And that to me doesn't mean just where the active military fighting is going on, but every place where we are today, because there is the resentment and we can't afford it. The troops went into Korea when I was in high school. They're still there. They've been in Germany and they've been in Japan since World War II. So it is really time to come home out of necessity. So I am very pleased that the country is coming in this direction, even though you might not hear it on TV at night, and although you don't hear it from the other candidates, I am very optimistic that these attitudes will change. For instance, the American people got pretty annoyed and pretty upset about this attack on the internet with Stop Online Piracy Act. You know, and of course, with your help, we were able to defeat that. It has been removed from the floor, both in the House and the Senate. But guess what? They have another bill coming up this week, which is worse, and that's called statesman. Weapon is not only the energy of a whole generation, but also the internet is our friend, and they would like to control the internet. So if you care about it, let your congressmen know and let your senators know they better not vote for this bill next week. Yeah. Have been rather systematic over many decades, but especially worse in the last 10 years. And after 9/11, there was a lot of concern, and much of it justifiable on what had happened. It was a terrible day for us. But instead of trying to understand the principle that the CIA has analyzed and written about called blowback, they decided to blame the American citizens and pass the Patriot Act and analyze the American citizen as if that was. Put that high on the list for repeal. Of course, on my list also ought to be all the illegal legislation passed by executive order. Yeah. The to nationalize everything. Very, very dangerous piece of legislation to be on the books. But the president renewed that by executive order, not a legislative effect. He changed the wording, not under wartime conditions, but even under peacetime conditions, he can make this elected. And we've all heard, the big complaint about the president trying to interfere and lecturing the Supreme Court of Obamacare. And he does it at the court, generally speaking, this legislative branch and executive branch is not supposed to do that. But that was rather minor compared to what the president actually does. Because, lecturing is one thing, but what about the interference, him assuming that he can, on his own announcement, executive order, that he's allowed to become the prosecutor and the judge and the jury and the executioner and execute and assassinate American citizens.
Impeach him now!
Be high on the agenda for changing it. All the laws that have been passed by executive order are up for grabs, because although I personally disagree with the idea that you should legislate anything by the executive order, I would say that a constitutional president has the authority to use the executive order to cancel out all the to permit law enforcement officers to strip search without probable cause anybody. And everybody should know what's going on at the airports. And I would think if we tolerate this and look at what the pictures that happen of all the groping and things go on and knowing what kind of powers, if we don't do something about it, we have to start blaming ourselves. We've been too lackadaisical, so we need to wake up and do something. There was a recent piece of legislation passed to protect very special people. These very special people that want special attention are those ones who are protected by Secret Service. I keep thinking, I didn't use the Secret Service, but I didn't know quite what kind of people they were anyway. But that's beside the point. But what the law says was if you're one of those special people and you're protected by the Secret Service, that you have special rights. If anybody gets within a certain distance of that individual and demonstrates by holding up a sign and politicking, you can end up getting 10 years for that. What happened to the First Amendment? I think the arrogance and the elitism of the politicians ought to be challenged by us, and the only way we can do that is change the electorate and change the Congress and change the presidency. There was a saying that went around that said that, if you weren't a bleeding heart liberal when you were 20, you didn't have a heart. But if you weren't a conservative by the time you were 40, then you didn't have a brain. My suggestion is, why can't we have a heart and a brain at the same time? Warned us to be careful that you don't allow the society to morph into a pure democracy versus a republic, a representative government, rather than a pure democracy. implies that 51%, the groups banding together, 51% gangs up on the minority. Maybe the non-productive individuals can gang up on and penalize and live off the minority. But the whole purpose of a Bill of Rights and the Constitution is to protect the minority. That is the purpose of it, so you don't want a pure democracy. They warned if you have a democracy, then you will end up with a society that wastes and consumes. And this is what we've been doing. We've been wasting and we're consuming. We're careless about how we waste overseas and how much debt we have and how inefficient we are and all this money is being spent by the government. But the final conclusion was that if we pursue that, it will self-destruct. And this is what we're on the verge of, on having a much more major crisis. And it would come, from my estimation, it would come in the form of the bursting of the last bubble. And we've had the bursting of many bubbles. We've had a NASDAQ bubble and a housing bubble, and they're having a little trouble getting another bubble going, but they do have one going. And the world is participating in it, and it's an illusion that we are still powerful and we still have the currency of the world, and it's not true, but there's an illusion out there. So what we have now is a bond bubble. The price of buying a bond and getting no interest is way, way too high, and the value of our currency is in the form of a bubble. It's an illusion, and the world is still taking our money, less so every single day, and other countries are now banding together, and they're challenging us as the issue of the reserve currency of the world. Quite frankly, I believe there's been a lot behind us going into the Middle East. When any time a country threatens to use something other than dollars for oil, the connection of the dollar and oil has been very, very important for us economically. If that is challenged, there's a new currency, or somebody decides to use a gold currency, that means the dollar's going down, interest rates going up, and we're going to have a lot bigger problem. This is why we have to understand the economics of what's going on, understand the value of individual liberty, and how that's connected to a sensible foreign policy. And this all comes together when you understand what personal liberty is all about. Personal liberty to me means that we own our own lives, that our life and our liberty comes from a creator or in a natural way, and does not come from our government. And if the government doesn't play any role at all, it's to protect that liberty and allow individuals to own their own life, which means that individuals can make their own decisions about their life in any way they want, even if they do things that might be harmful to themselves. Because governments, when they embark on a system that says we are going to protect each individual against ourselves, themselves, or whatever, that means there's nothing left. That means the government will be telling us what we eat, drink, smoke, exercise, read, the whole works. So, yes, in a free society, you have a lot of freedom, but you also have a lot of responsibility, and you have to say, that they can go to the neighbor and force them to take care of you. So yes, there are some risks in having free people. But compared to when the government tells us what to do, when the government and the politicians and the bureaucrats make these decisions, when they make the mistakes and they can't know what's best for you, it hurts all of us. So that is minor, that is major compared to us making our own decisions. Sort of chopped into pieces. The founders, as I said earlier, knew and understood that liberty meant social liberty, intellectual liberty, and economic liberty. They were all the same. But now we generally have one group defending economic liberty fairly well and sometimes poorly, then another group that defend civil liberties fairly well, but too often poorly. But it's all one issue. If you have your right to your life, you have a right to your own lifestyle, you have your own right to pick your own religion, and you should have your own your right to spend your own money. And the money you earn should be your own. So now in Washington, we're fighting over power, we're fighting over trying to divide up the shrinking pie. But at the same time, what we're doing now is we're trying to bring people together. People say what we need is more compromise. And I don't buy into that. I think we've had way too much compromise in Washington because what they do is there's two sides of the political spectrum and each wants to spend money. Some want to spend at home and some want to spend overseas, so they compromise and they spend money. So what we need to do is have a coalition of people who understand what personal liberty is about for different reasons. Maybe economic liberty, maybe religious liberty, maybe personal liberty, maybe liberty to practice your own habits as you please. Then the people come together. People become friends because they identify with the principle of liberty, and you don't even care about how people use their liberty if they don't hurt anybody else and they enjoy that liberty for themselves. And has served us well. It was far from perfect because in our early history we had a lot of punishment for people in certain groups that they didn't earn their rights because they belonged to a group. And I think that's wrong. People shouldn't ever be punished because they belong to a group, but they shouldn't have any special favors because they belong to a group either. Together. Diversity will sort of melt together for different reasons. And most of us understand this pretty well on religion. We have freedom of religion and freedom not to practice religion. And because somebody has a religion you don't understand and you don't really want to get involved in, you don't bother with it. You just ignore it. Because there's freedom of religion, you don't enforce what they believe. You don't endorse their religious beliefs. Well, why is it so much that if we give people the freedom to practice their own lifestyle the way they want, that we're endorsing behavior that is unbecoming in our estimate, that it isn't the kind of thing that we would do? But this is one thing that you have to do. You have to have more tolerance as long as people won't use their liberty to do anything other than to run their own lives and not anybody else's lives. This would be a major undertaking. I think it would solve a lot of our problems. I think the coming together would be much easier. I think there would be a lot more productivity if this is the understanding. Limit the size of government and do one of those things that are authorized. And instead of being the counterfeiters of the world, we should be the protector of the value of the money. Instead of undermining contract rights like they do all the time, interfering on contracts, they should be protecting contracts. Instead of owning our property and telling us how to own our property and what we can do with it, they should be protecting private ownership. So the government does have a role to play. But if we did that, I think we could get back on our feet rather quickly. But we have to identify that it comes from the fact that each and every one of us are important because we're individuals and not because of any other reason, that we're all individuals and we all should have equal protection under the law. Unfairly, the drug laws are enforced. If you're poor and you're a minority and you commit the same crime as somebody who's rich and a different color, the odds of that individual ending up in prison is much, much greater. So I have a solution for that. I would say that it would be a lot easier to come up with equal justice under the law to get rid of all these drug laws. disapprove of the use of most drugs, even most of the prescription drugs, too.
Those are the worst!
There's more addiction, number-wise, with prescription drugs than there are with the illegal drugs. It's just that the problem is compounded. It's not that, once again, that I would endorse people using drugs, because I think they're very dangerous and people should be cautious. But it's the whole idea of allowing who's going to make these decisions for us. So if they can decide what kind of drug you can take and what you can do, what if somebody says, well, you know, there is a real benefit from medical marijuana, why should the government send the troops out to arrest people who are doing this? It makes no sense at all. Because the control of the power should be left for the states. People a lot of times get bad raps for that. Oh, you're some type of a bad person. We talk about states' rights all the time. But that means that most government should be local. But this issue on the drug, let's say medical marijuana, is a good example because it's more likely the far left, which criticizes people for using those words, states' rights, are the ones who are most upset with the federal government coming in and arresting people for growing marijuana in their backyard.
Yeah,
so this should bring, once again, this whole issue of local government together, both left and right, and saying, look, we can sort these problems out much better. And even if there's to be some regulations, there's regulations on alcohol, regulations in the state on alcohol is pretty minor. It's not a big problem at all. It seems to work. It's so much better than those 12 years of prohibition of alcohol, which was we need a better understanding. We need more confidence. We shouldn't be afraid of living in a free society. We have to challenge the status quo. We have to challenge decades of an educational system that teaches us to tolerate and accept, well, you have to have a Federal Reserve, you have to have the federal government protecting you, you have to have consumer protection, you have to have all these things. And we finally wake up and it doesn't work. And this is what's happening today. No matter how well motivated some of these programs have been, no matter how well motivated it has been for the entitlement system, it flat doesn't work. So I've concluded that if you truly are a humanitarian, I think we all have that instinct to be humanitarian, care about our fellow man. If you do, you have to believe in the free market, because the free market and sound money is the only system that can produce enough wealth to take care of the poor and provide for the So what we need is a determination effort to continue to do this and to continue to inspire people to be involved, to further understand, study these problems and understand them. And this is what I really think is happening, like it's never happened before, not for a long time. And this is the reason I'm encouraged. I think a lot of good things are happening, but believe me, I'm still concerned. I'm concerned because those who do have the power, those in both parties that have a lot of power, and they see it being attacked, they're going to be tenacious in trying to clean this power. That's why they don't want a revelation on how the Fed spent $15 trillion in the bailout procedure, and they're getting prepared to bail out their friends in Europe and buy up Greek debt and dump it on the American people. So there is a reason for them to be very tenacious in clinging to this power. But the evidence is clear about the failure. If you take, for instance, the effort to make sure everybody had a house, that sounds good. Everybody should have a house. Maybe if they can't afford it or not to take care of it, why should we give them a house if they don't, end up taking care of it? Maybe they should qualify and work for it. But the effort was, no, that's being cold-hearted. We run a program. So we're going to print a lot of money, easy credit, and then we're going to have the mortgage people, the Fannie Mae's, and the Freddie Mac, and the builders, and the banks get involved, and we're going to pump all this money in the houses. Seemed to work. People were getting a lot more houses. There's a housing boom, and the price of the house was going up. People say, I can borrow against my equity. It was a lot of fun. It looked like a perpetual money machine. The handwriting was on the wall. All Austrian economists knew there was a bubble there. And making tens of billions of dollars in the derivatives market and all the wild speculation was going on. They said, hey, we're going to go bankrupt, we're going to go bankrupt, we got it there on the other side, we're too big to fail. Come. So the Congress and the Federal Reserve goes and bails out the people who were ripping us off. And guess what? And guess what? Guess what? The middle class people lost their jobs and they lost their houses, and the housing problem is still a big, big mess. So it doesn't work. This idea that you get free medical care from the government, where's the government? Where do you get free anything other than taking it from somebody else? Don't steal, the government hates competition. But the system is failing all around. This is an opportunity to offer, once again, the principles of liberty. We had this great start, and then we backed off, and we've slipped, and we've been very careless. Whose fault is it? It's everybody's. The people, they got lackadaisical, they thought they could live off somebody else. The business people got more interested in the materialism of the products, and they got more by having high-paid lobbyists and getting the government to get special deals and benefits. And generation after generation forgot about how do you produce wealth? Because somebody has to work for it. And this is what has to come back, because we're broke. We're broke, and the debt bubble is the biggest in the history of the world. It's very, very serious. And yet, in Washington, their head is still in the sand. The other candidates, what do they offer to cut? If it's a debt bubble, what do you think we should cut spending? I mean, I don't think that would be a good idea. I'd like to start off, of course, with $1 trillion in the first year. No, I said the government, we're already in an economic crisis because the government's not spending the money. I want the people to spend the money. And that's so the revolution is alive and well, let me tell you, and there's a lot of excitement going on, and I am optimistic because I believe this whole new generation that's excited about it has invigorated many of us in another generation who seem to be part of a remnant trying to hold it together and encourage people. But now it is noted in many of the audiences and even by the media that yes, there's a young generation out there and joining in and coming to these rallies, but there are some other people coming too. So it is universal, it is spreading, and for this reason, we should all be very pleased with what's happening, but don't ever get complacent. Challenge us, and they'll say, wait, you people want to go back to the Dark Ages, you want to go back to the 19th century, you want to go back to this silly old thing by gold standards. And my answer to them who say that we want to go backwards is that tyranny is old-fashioned. Yeah. Much, much older than liberty. Solutions, expanding the size of government and more spending. They're just working their way toward tyranny and the rejection of the free market system and the prosperity that we have. They would also like to say that you can't do this on the gold standard, that's old-fashioned. But the gold standard is a natural money. It's not a government money. Government money is fiat money. The only way they can get it to work temporarily is by a gun. They say you use it. If you use gold and silver, we'll put you in jail. And they changed the legal tender laws. So the market has picked gold and silver to be money, not individuals. But there is a better gold standard than we had in the 19th century because there were problems with it. It was a bimetallic standard, and the ratio was fixed. And there's reasons that argue the case that you don't need to do that. There's reason to argue that the market might well be more in charge of the monetary system rather than the government, because governments have been notorious in destroying the money because there's always a political angle, fighting wars and then promising entitlements to the people. So there is no reason for us to be defensive about going back. I think we are the wave of the future, they are the past. So we must pursue, we must continue to do what we have been doing, and we must be involved. I'm involved in the best way I can. We have a campaign going on. There's going to be an election. Why don't we show what we can do in an election?
President Paul! President Paul!
President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul! President Paul!
So every one of us has an obligation. Liberty is appealing to me, not only because it brings people together, but in a personal way, I think what the real purpose for an individual life is for us as individuals to pursue virtue and excellence. And governments can't do that for us. If they try that, they destroy us. So it is this goal to seek to improve ourselves and to help other people, but it is the market economy and property rights that will make the difference in production. So we have to reject the notions of what we've been taught for 70 years, that we need Keynesian economics, paper money, inflationism. They still argue, and the reason why the budget isn't the analysis, they actually believe deficits are the way to get out of the problem of having a deficit. You have a huge debt, you get a bigger deficit. So but that's actually, they're taught this and they believe this is the case. So common sense would tell us that that isn't the solution. Common sense is to allow the people to have their freedom of choice, and having each and every one of us assume responsibility for ourselves. I've often said, and I believe this sincerely, if I could live in a free society, but I would have to live with less material wealth, I enjoy my freedom so much, I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah.
We don't have to make that choice. If we dwell on freedom, we will have our material prosperity. And this is, and if you dwell on the prosperity and we become only concentrate on materialism, actually we don't gain either one. So this is such an offer to us, and I think we're going to have an easier time than some other systems have, because we have great traditions. And we just have to renew them. We have to renew the enthusiasm. This is the reason I'm so delighted to come and visit with you and find people who are so inspiring, and because you're anxious and interested and you know what we ought to do. So I want to thank you very much for coming, because I am convinced that this philosophy of freedom is the way, and essentially the only way to achieve not only peace, but prosperity as well. Thank you very much.
That's great. It's like the applause right now playing.
They're already in their truck.
Ooh,
And Irene.
really?
Right there. They're right there.
Let's go to eat.